I see a recording. It is Metro Melik. We are 15 minutes late into making this happen. I do apologize, but yet it is another edition of What's the Haps Lansing and Terrell Bang. Peter Spadafore is here. I know you as council person, Spadafore, but I know there's more to you. Please introduce yourself to the world as you would in normal life.
All right, then.
How do you do that?
How do you do that? Normal life introduction. I haven't had normal life since about March 12th. So why don't we just say how I would introduce myself? So Peter Spadafore, currently the president of the Lansing City Council, elected at-large member in my third year on City Council. Lifelong Lansing resident, who my day job, if you're interested in that, is I'm the Deputy Executive Director for the Michigan Association of Superintendents. So that's a mouthful, but yes. that's me in a nutshell. I live in Lansing over on Moores River Drive with my husband Daniel and our black lab Sadie. So that's me.
That's fantastic. Now that deputy, that whatever that title was, like that's a lot of $10 words. What does that even mean?
So, Deputy Executive Director for External Relations at MASA, which is the Michigan Association of Superintendents and Administrators. I'm their spokesperson, lobbyist, if you will, communications guru, punching bag for the media sometimes, and sometimes not, but for superintendents and administrators in the state of Michigan. So we represent most, if not all, of the superintendents in Michigan for K-12 schools. And as you know from my past, education is really important to me. I served over 6 years on the Lansing School Board.
Yes. So it is a school system organization to help them do what they need to do within the bureaucracy of what laws and making sure the students are getting what they need.
That's fair. Yeah. So you've heard of, you've probably seen many nonprofit organizations, professional organizations. We represent superintendents, and we also do professional development with them. So training and conferences back when we could get together, help them with media relations and legislative affairs and things like that. So really try to serve superintendents so that they can better do their job as district leaders for the students and the staff and faculty they work with.
People ask me often, am I from Lansing? And I'm like, no. I just kind of just nonchalantly be like, no. They're like, but your business and all that you do. I'm like, that doesn't mean I can't love Lansing. So the only thing that I'm missing is that lifelong. Talk about that. Like, what did your parents do? Like, how were you brought into this world? And then the next question after that would be, why do you choose to live here?
Sure. So, well, my parents both from the area. My mom's family moved here just before she was born. She was born at Sparrow Hospital, just like myself, and my father as well. My dad and his family have been in Lansing for over 100 years, had a few businesses in town, grocery stores. Actually, folks remember Spadafore Distributing was a beer and wine distributorship here in town. And that wasn't my dad, that was his uncle's, but still the name I think people recognize from the great trucks that used to drive around town. When I was knocking doors, I had a lot of people said, I used to work for your dad. And I'm like, nah, you work for my grandpa. So they get upset with me for that one. But, it is what it is.
Yeah.
But that's that. So, when I was looking for colleges, after graduation high school, I went to Michigan State University. It was right in the backyard. I made a deal though that I was gonna live on campus because I didn't want to live at home. So I did that, lived at Michigan State James Madison College, and started looking for jobs. And I was really interested in politics. And there are 51 cities in the country where you can do that kind of work. And the one where I grew up had some job openings. I actually interned at MASA in 2006 when I was in college still. So I came back about 4 years ago to work and sat in the office where I interned. So it was, kind of big full circle for me there.
How was your MSU experience? How would you describe that?
It was great. I did a lot of different things, lots of extracurriculars. I was in the Spartan marching band. I think I could still probably play the fight song on my saxophone, but I'm not sure. It's probably just muscle memory more than talent at this point. But so, did that, was Student government, that probably doesn't surprise anybody who knows me, that I was involved in student government at Michigan State and James Madison College. I studied social policy and education policy. And of course, I was a child that grew up just, high school was around 9/11. So I also minored in Homeland Security.
Oh,
It was a new program at Michigan State there. So I always knew that that was going to be something that interested me. So it was policy and Homeland Security were my two focuses in college.
you're a delightful nerd.
Yeah, I think that's accurate.
That is interesting. That is cool. And then you said something that I think needs to be highlighted. There's one of 51. Like we're a state capital.
Mhm.
Whether it's by proximity, choice, or otherwise, because if you look at the history of the state capitals of Michigan, it dotted around a little bit. And then I think there still might be an argument as to whether or not Lansing is the place to be, but it is. And I think it would be difficult to move the capital at this point, right? Because
Yeah, I don't see that happening anytime soon.
but it is, we're in the middle of the mitten. And so I think it's fantastic that you were able to find your path throughout the Lansing Metro.
Well, that's I think what I love about Lansing is it's a great place. You've got a lot of things to do. When you look at the metro area specifically, we've got a lot going on. You want to see a Broadway show? Great. You want to see sports? Like big major sporting events? We've got that going on. You want good local food? Absolutely. I mean, that's something that surprises, I think, folks that don't really know Lansing. They, now they've seen it a little bit more on the news lately, but they're always surprised that the number of things that you can do here to keep busy, entertain yourself, have fun. It's really a great place to live, work, and raise a family. And that's not just something that politicians say. It's actually true.
It is true. And there's a lot of fantastic attributes that I think we as ourselves don't speak about. Like, we've got two rivers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they converge right near downtown. You have people like Rivertown Adventures, Paul Brogan and his people utilizing the waterways. And then, but you still have that old attitude where like, oh, that water is filthy. And I'm like, well, you're not drinking out of a river anywhere. There's very few places that you're just going to take a glass of river water, right?
Right. Exactly.
So like, I'm not knowing what you're expecting. We're not in,
I wouldn't go swimming after a large rainstorm, but I certainly think the water's fine to dunk in. Summer day, it's perfect. And I think, a shift in this community has been really taking the river seriously as an economic development tool, as an activity for people to look at. If you go downtown, 15 years ago, it was parking structures and, overgrown spots. And now you've got Rotary Park, you've got really folks trying to activate that riverfront. And it's not the only asset we've got in town for sure, but you bring it up and it's something that we've historically been a city that I think thinks things that are fun to do are for other people, and I don't mean that disparaging. I just think, oh, well, we couldn't do that here. And it turns out you can,
Yes.
all those things. Baseball, we had the Lugnuts that's been going strong since '96. We tried soccer, it didn't work out, but we can keep trying. We've got the river, all those things that, common ground, just the things that you can do here that I think folks think, well, those are for bigger cities, for other places. Like, no, we should do those things here. Why not?
We have the space. I mean, I don't know the name of it because I'm apparently with my gray hair, I'm not the audience per se, but the techno festival that happens, I think, after Common Ground, and I don't remember the name of it, but I remember the first year that it happened, and I was driving to work around 5 o'clock, slightly late for work, and I was like, where are all these 20-something-year-olds coming from?
Yes.
And they were converging upon Adado Riverfront Park, and there was thousands of them, and I was like, whoa. And they're like, see, you can do it here, you can make it happen. All kinds of wonderful things. So Peter, you talked about, your history, going to school, and then you ended up at the job. What crazy thing went off in your head and said, I'm going to run for city council?
I don't know. I had too much free time, apparently. No. So 4 years ago or so, I was serving on the school board, and I really enjoyed the work that the school did. And we didn't talk about that. I think that's one thing that we don't talk about often enough, is actually the asset that the Lansing School District is to this community. Where else can you do international baccalaureate and STEM and Chinese immersion and all the other things that we have through the Pathway Promise, which still one of my proudest things to be a part of was that transformation of the district. But
Lansing Promise.
Lansing Promise, the only one like it in the area. We just received several $100,000. I'm on the Promise board as well. Several $100,000 in tax capture, which was the whole point of the Promise in the beginning, was to try and elevate tax rates and get that growth in taxable income into the Promise to help support scholarships for students. I think I heard we had 360 scholars this year. Really gangbusters on how phenomenal the Lansing Promise has been. And we've had huge supporters like Magic Johnson and Kelly Dean, and then folks giving $1, $2, $5, $10 donations, just to make sure that every Lansing student has an opportunity to succeed. That was something, it's a big paradigm shift too, as we're entering a debate right now about student debt and student loan in this country. But in Lansing, the finances shouldn't be the barrier to dabbling your toes in community college or four-year university, or some trade schools now are part of the program. So that's one of the big assets I think we have in this community, is just the district is great teachers. And I loved the time I spent on the school board. And when I got there, it was pretty dysfunctional. And it wasn't one person or everybody's fault. It was just, it was how it was. And we worked over the 6 years I was there to really change that dynamic and make it a more collegial, forward-thinking board. And I think that was evidenced by the time I was stepping off that board. And then the reason I ran for city council was because I looked at city council and the mayor, and not to disparage anybody, but it didn't seem that there was a lot of folks willing to get along or try to get along even. So I thought, what? I think I can do better. And that was how I ran. I didn't make grand promises of fixing all the roads or, anything like, that was part of the discussion, was we're going to focus on these things, but mine was really about better governance. And I don't think the city can be successful if we're having food fights on the 10th floor of City Hall, right? So I think it's important that maybe we're not always going to get along, not always going to
Wait, hold on. Was there a food fight?
No, I think just hypothetically speaking.
Okay.
But I wouldn't put it past me on some days, but I do think that it is important that
Take this sandwich.
Exactly.
I've had enough.
After 4 or 5 hours of it, I wouldn't mind if someone started throwing food. But I do think that good governance is important for a successful city, because if we're making the headlines because of dysfunction at City Hall, people aren't going to come here. They're not going to want to deal with the city. They're not going to invest in the city. They're not going to move here. If they open up the paper or click on the State Journal's website and see that as the front headline, it's not going to work. So that's part of why I ran, was just to try and bring what I think is a skill for patience and good governance to the table at City Hall.
Fantastic. We're going to take a brief pause, because talking about positive things in Lansing, there's an organization called the League of Enchantment. And I don't know the terminology, but basically there's some superheroes doing some superhero work, going into hospitals. When they were able to do that, they're doing a lot of more online stuff, but these superheroes going in and visiting young people while they were on their path to health. So let's come right back right after that brief pause.
Who are we? We are the League of Enchantment, a Michigan-based 501c nonprofit that coordinates with community groups, police, fire, cancer support, and hospitals. What do? We are superheroes, princesses, and villains that help change lives. We brighten a child's day. We speak on topics from anti-bullying and body positivity to struggles with PTSD and anxiety. We are the League of Enchantment.
And it's another edition of What's the Haps Lansing. Thanks for tuning in. It's Metro Melik here, and we have Mr. Peter Spadafore talking about what it's like to be on city council. And he started off with why he began to start his foray into that. He said, we need to start hearing more positive things about Lansing. That's kind of how you live your life. And then you saw a problem and you said, I'm going to solve it.
Well, I'm going to try.
Well, I'm talking about Lansing because I know Lansing and I live here. And there's a cliche. I think I'm allowed one a show. Are you part of the problem? Or are you part of the solution? And people can complain, and that's fine. But my thing is, what are you going to do about it? Because if you're not going to participate, if you're not going to cast your ballot, if you're not going to pick up the piece of trash, if you're not going to be aware of what city council is talking about and what subjects are going on, if you're not going to be at least on a superficial level of saying, hey, I participate, then I think your complaint is going to fall on my deaf ears. And then so people ask me, well, Melik, what are you doing to try to make your city better? I have people like you come on and talk about what are the things that a lot of us might not know detail about, especially now. I can't go. Oh, actually, you have it set up so I could watch virtually from my house. It's probably easier to participate in a council meeting than it was before.
It absolutely is. We've seen, I think, I won't say record numbers, but sustained numbers of individuals watching and even participating in public comment, which doesn't surprise me, but it's great to see so many folks interested. It lends to I think last city council meeting I was on from 4:30 until 11:30 in this very chair, and I couldn't walk very well the next morning because my backside was a little sore, but it was definitely something that it's good to see. And I think you're seeing that around the state more is school boards, city councils, all sorts of folks, sorts of things. Folks are really getting involved and paying attention as Zooming has brought it into their homes a lot easier. Now, we've always broadcast online and on cable, and I have friends who will tell me, oh, I was watching city council Monday night, or I was watching the school board meeting, and my first question is why? And then the second question is, what did you learn and all that kind of stuff. And it's really interesting the number of engaged people around town who, not to sound full of myself, but I saw you on city council meeting this week and don't even know who they are. Or I had someone thank me at a gas station for something, or someone at Meyer stopped me, to register a complaint. And on all those things are not surprising, but the way folks are now able to participate in those meetings rather than just watch them at home has really changed, I think, how governance works.
I think, besides the 7-hour meeting, I think there's definitely some benefit to that. So the city council, right? It's a governing body, right? What exactly does that mean?
Well, so in Lansing, we're not unique because this isn't something that happens, or it's something that happens other places. We have a strong mayor system, and it's useful to think of. Everyone's familiar with Washington.
So define that strong mayor as opposed to East Lansing, our neighbor, right?
Yes. So over at East Lansing, they select their mayor from among the council, and in East Lansing, the mayor's role is similar to mine as president of council, except Mayor Stevens is also the mayor, right? So he signs all the documents and things like that. And they have a city manager who is a professional staff member hired by the council to run the day-to-day operations of the city, apolitical, not elected, accountable to the council. Here in Lansing, we have called a strong mayor. Although I argue I can lift more than Andy Shore, but I don't think that's what we're talking about. So
you guys on front lawn just doing push-ups.
Just push-ups, yeah, that's right. So we got strong mayor who is elected by the city, independent from the council, who runs the city day to day. And it's useful to, an analogy may be the president to Congress, right? Whereas we're the legislative branch of government. He is the executive branch. We control the purse strings, we set policy, he implements those things on a day-to-day basis. So in theory, we work together on all sorts of things, including the budget, to get something passed that we all can agree to. He has veto power over anything we do, which means 6 of us have to vote against him to override that veto. It's not happened. In fact, he's not vetoed much. He did line item some things in the budget, but nothing policy wise, especially since I've been president, because my goal is to try and get things across the finish line that will become law, not just for statements, right? So I'm a firm believer that an 8-0 vote is the best outcome, because that means everyone was heard. In a 5-3 vote, that means 3 people in the constituencies they believe to represent weren't heard in the outcome. So I try to work with colleagues to get something that's amenable, and sometimes that means we have to compromise on things. But anyway, back to strong mayor. So that's the difference, is we have a strong mayor versus East Lansing has that city manager model.
Thank you very much for that distinction and description, because I think that's important to note. And then the city council, you said, is the legislative branch. Now, I've heard some people call the city council the boss of the mayor. Like, how would you deal with that type of statement?
Well, I don't think it's entirely accurate. I don't think either of us is the boss. We're co-equal branches of government, and plainly the people of Lansing are the boss, and they, at the end of the day, they can hire and fire us on at the ballot. And I just think there's in a place like East Lansing, yes, the council would be the ultimate boss, and a school district, for instance, where they hire the superintendent, the board is, yes, in fact, the boss, the superintendent. But in Lansing, it's not that way for the city council. We are a co-equal branch of government, each with our separate and distinct duties. Sometimes they blur. Sometimes mayor has to have a conversation with us, like, hey, stay in your lane. And sometimes we have to remind him that we are in our lane. So that's how it works. So, that's government.
Right. So how many times a year do you meet? Is it not 52 weeks?
Not 52. It used to be. Now, legally, under the charter, we're required to meet 26 times a year. So that's about every other week. And actually, interestingly, we had to cancel a meeting this year because of COVID. And that was when we weren't sure if we could meet virtually because the law changed. So we're only on schedule to meet 25 times this year. So to dot the I's and cross the T's, we scheduled a special meeting to approve our schedule for next year, which normally we would do at a regular meeting. But because we had to add that 26, we meet at least 26 times plus committee meetings.
Oh. So why, in my mind, you guys met weekly every month?
We used to. So there was a charter amendment a few years back that dropped that requirement from meeting every week to 26 times a year.
Oh.
It was one of those, I think they were having council meetings just to have council meetings. And it was like, okay, we don't need to meet every week, but we can still meet more than 26 times. But let's just say at least every other week we meet. So I think that was a vote approved by the residents of Lansing a few years back to drop that down.
Probably right at the time that I had a baby.
Probably.
Trying to keep up with stuff with a young person in the house has been very complicated. And then, so during these meetings, like, what is the goal of a city council meeting?
Well, it depends on the meeting. So let me walk you through how the process works to set up a meeting if anyone's interested in that, or if they want to tune out, I'll be done in about 3 minutes. So basically, the president and vice president, under the way I've worked with Vice President Hussein, is we get what's called an overview. And that is all of the things that have come out of committee, all of the things that we need to take care of, whether they're contract approvals or a budget, or a simple just resolution, thanking someone for their contributions to America or the city, those types of things, those tributes that we have. And then we go over them and say, okay, we're going to deal with these. We're going to deal with these. I'm not going to deal with these. And then we send that final overview to the clerk around Thursday. And then Chris Swope and his team put together the council packets with all the supporting material for those items. And then it comes to me for final sign off. And then it heads out to the public as the document. So the meeting's objective is really to get the business of the city done. There are things that can't happen without our approval. We get a grant, right? We had someone donate $6,000 to the city to purchase something. We have to formally accept that before the mayor can expend it. So those are the kinds of things that we do. And some of it can be very boring, and some of it can be rather exciting, and some of it draws a lot of controversy, and some doesn't. And that's the goal of a meeting. And it's not just to meet. There are important things. It's not always the headline grabbing stuff, but government couldn't work without us approving those things. The extension of the state of emergency is something we've handled every month since COVID started. And that's very important because it unlocks key resources from the state and federal government for us to use. It authorizes the mayor to have certain powers that we could take away if we felt those were being abused. So although it looks boring, and it's quite interesting and important work for the city.
Important work. This is probably a bad combination or analogy, but it's like the parent role to make sure that the whole thing is running. I'm sorry, I tripped something, but it's like, hey, we need to make sure that all of our people are being taken care of while they're all busy doing their things.
Exactly. And it's also an ability to give the public an opportunity to take a look at the business of the city, right? Because if all these things were just done by me signing a piece of paper or council vice president signing a piece of paper, the public would have no idea about some of the stuff we're doing. And I'm not naive to think that the entire city is watching city council, but someone's watching and they're paying attention. And, the City Pulse and the State Journal are watching, and the local news stations are watching. So it's an opportunity for folks to stay up on what's going on. And, I'm on social media and catch it, and folks are already talking about what's happening at the next city council meeting over on Reddit. So it's very interesting. I don't know, man, but it happens.
Wow. All right. I mean, but being the capital, and especially with things that are going on at this point in time, I mean, I can see. What is one? Because we got about 3 or 4 minutes left. So the 3 or 4 years that you've been on, not quite 4 years, but what is one of the most fun things that you've been able to participate in by being on city council?
Well, I think the fun things, when we get to do things like the drive-through trick or treat, or, showing up at the Men Making a Difference event down at Benjamin Davis, just those kinds of things where you get to kind of be in and see the work that gets done by so many volunteers, so many dedicated folks around town. I think those are fun. I think some of the very somber and things that I'll consider to be an honor, recognizing people who do contributions to the city. I got to read the names of firefighters that lost their lives in 9/11 at our tribute and things like that. So really, those are the things that are really part of being an honor. But it's just it's a cool gig, right? You get to be involved in what's happening in our community and a part of trying to make things happen. I didn't do this, but I was a part of the team that got that Meijer open downtown. And you might think that's not a huge deal. It's it's just a development project, but it's huge for the folks downtown that live or work down there. That it's a food desert, and that's a huge problem in our community. And we need to do better about getting more things elsewhere, but we started there and we're not done yet. And it's great to see that kind of stuff come to fruition. Because at the end of the day, I'm just a caretaker for this seat. I'm here for 26 years. I don't know what it's going to be, but
wait, are you running again?
We'll talk about that later. But it's one of those things that it's a really cool opportunity to be a part of this community and making it a better place. It's just like I look back on my time on the school board as we were able to reshape education in this city of Lansing, and that was really cool. Some might not think it was fun, but it was fun for me. And it's fun for me to try and look at our budget and solve our problems. We're not going to have an easy budget this year. So it's going to be the poli-sci nerd in me is going to roll up my sleeves and take a look at ways that we can still deliver services to our residents, because the trash still needs to get picked up. When, the lights need to come on, all that stuff that people take for granted, not in a bad way, but, they expect that their trash gets picked up. They expect that the water is clean. And those are all things that are in our trust.
It's kind of taken for granted in a sense that it's always there. The lights are always on. So you probably don't really notice it. It's like your internet. You don't notice it until it's off, right? So then you're like, oh my God, who's our provider? Right?
Exactly.
And then what I noticed, and I don't know I don't know what government did it, but the new lights that happened in the last couple of years with the LED things that are super bright but so much smaller. I mean, I'm almost wrecking my car going, look at those lights. Like those
well, that's the Board of Water and Light. They've got an aggressive replacement plan, but they're not replacing them until they burn out. It's a common sense thing. But you're exactly, you take it for granted until you realize, oh, there it is.
There it is, or there it was.
There it isn't.
There it isn't. So thank you very much for your time. I appreciate that. I apologize for my quirkiness. This is my first Zoom interview ever in life. I'm used to being able to interact in the space, but thank you very much. I hope I didn't do horrible.
No, it's great.
All right, and bless you, and thank you for being where you are and what you do for the community, and I hope and pray that you continue these things, and bless you. Thank you.
Thank you, Melik.
All right.